I just want to know, because this is unlike any roundtable we've had, Brad. We usually have family ministry leaders. We talk about family ministry, we talk about church, but today's different. We're talking about leadership in general. So I know several of you that have registered many of you don't work at a church. So how many of you work at a church? Just raise your hand, we'll start there. Okay, so most of you. How many of you work for a nonprofit kind of outside the church? Oh, wow, so we got several. How many of you don't work with anything related to the church, maybe school or leadership, or we got a few. Yay, okay, so we have different leaders. The point and the purpose of today is we just want to talk about leadership. Today in this climate, in this time, man, it's hard to be a leader. It's hard to lead well in uncertainty. It's hard to lead when we put these plans and schedules together and know that it's all going to change eventually. So leadership's a big deal. And we believe that if we have strong leaders, that's going to develop into strong churches and ultimately into strong homes and strong families. And that's why we're here, to talk about leadership. So before we get going, I just want to pray for us, and Brad's going to come up and introduce our guests. So let's pray. Father, we love you. God, I thank you for the leaders in this room who are in different walks of life. They lead different types of people. They lead in different areas of ministry and corporate world and in schools. And just, God, we thank you for their leadership. But God, I pray specifically right now that they don't just lead people. They're leading households. They're leading families. They're leading your children. And God, we take that very, very seriously. So as we hone in and become better leaders today together, would you teach us something new? Would you challenge us something new so that we can take that into our worlds and lead our homes, lead our people, lead our organizations for your kingdom and your glory? Father, we love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right,
Thanks,
Brad.
Bobby. Thank you. As I'm opening, I'm going to ask our distinguished guests to come on up. You know, I've heard a saying once that if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a new room, right? Well, I'm rarely the smartest person, but I didn't want to find a new room, but I did want to find some people that, in my life, that I know personally, that they're not only highly esteemed, but they're just good people, right? And so we've attempted to get a number of people that are up here in our panel that represent all walks of life. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. But what I want you to know today is going to be Bobby and I are going to sort of moderate the conversation, but it's meant to be engaging. Right? So if something they say piques your interest, all right, or you want to ask questions, it's a raise your hand, ask the question, and it's a back and forth. Bobby and I, our job will be to keep us on track. But as he mentioned, it's for you to leave here to feel equipped, right? Okay, I got something from today. For you to find community is maybe today you meet somebody here that's walking through the same things you're walking through. And then also for you to be introduced into this thing we call Empowered Homes and what this is, about how we help to equip churches and to equip leaders. But thank you to our guests. And so, Chris, we're going to start with you. And I'll just ask our panel, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and what you do.
Well, my name is Chris Sneller. I am the Director of Innovation for a ministry called Bridges International. We're the international student ministry of Cru. Bridges has about 350 staff members across the United States and Australia, England, and France. For a season, I was our national field director, so I supervised our staff. I traveled all the time. But I have 6 kids, 3 biological boys and 3 girls that we adopted from China. My boys are in college and high school. My girls are in junior high and elementary school. So our home is busy and loud and lots of fun. My academic interest is world Christianity and historical theology. So I teach at Houston Baptist University in that field as well.
My name is Fred Schaefer. I am the president of the board of directors for the ARC of Katy. The ARC is a nonprofit organization that serves individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have a day-hab program here in Katy. We just opened back up yesterday with a minimum number of participants. So I'm a career educator, 41 years in the field of education, all of that in the field of special education. And so I have my wife here. She is a retired educator as well. And we have 2 children. My daughter is married to an educator. She's an educator, and my son and his wife are oil and gas. So two opposite ends. And we have 4 grandchildren, and so we enjoy serving in our community and in our church, and so we keep busy with school and grandkids.
Hey everyone, I'm the operator of the Chick-fil-A in Katy, Fulshire. I've actually worked at Chick-fil-A for 20 years. So started with Rusty Wiley out here in this Katy area, and then was awarded a store last year. So my store this past September hit 1 year. I have a husband and 2 kids. They all like to work with me in the business as well at some capacity. So I have a little boy who is 10 and a girl who is 15 who just got her driver's learner's permit. So I'm a little nervous, but Devin, my husband's going to teach her, and I'm going to worry about other stuff. But we have at Chick-fil-A, we have about 100 employees. The age ranges from 16 to 22, and so really get to drive in what work ethic and integrity looks like in the workplace, and how to manage that as they go through school and life. So.
My name is Ronnie Moser. I'm the principal at Wood Creek Elementary School in Katy ISD. I've been in Katy since 2000. Back in the 90s, I was a teacher in Lampasas. If you're not sure where Lampasas is, just go nowhere and then go 50 more miles and you'll find Lampasas. It's out there. It's the big town because it has the Walmart, right? So some of you guys have been in small towns. You guys are familiar with that. So I taught 3rd grade at the time. My wife, who this June will be married 25 years. That's crazy. It feels weird I can say that. But we met in high school, and she was an accountant. She stays home now. We have 2 kids. My daughter is 15, also learner's permit. She took me on to I-10 the other day, and yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy. After that, I got some please be patient student driver, magnets. Put them everywhere, all over that car, back, side, front, everywhere. But anyway, my son, she's at Katy High School. My son is 12. He's at Wood Creek Junior High, and they're just growing up. He's, it's like, hey, Zach. He's like, hey. Now I'm like, whoa, oh, what the heck? Anyway, so I've been out at Wood Creek Elementary since 2007 when it opened, and just blessed to be there. So thanks for having me here.
Well, my name is Doug Bischoff. I'm the Next Generations Minister at Houston's First Baptist Church, and so I've been there about 13 years now. Was many years in student ministry and shot my mouth off too much about what we should be doing with the other divisions, so they said, great, you're in charge of those, and so learned that lesson the hard way. But really love what I do. I lead the teams. One of the challenges is I lead a team of teams. And so we have a preschool team, a children's ministry team, a special needs ministry team, and a student ministry team, and I lead those for our church. My wife and I have been married almost 25 years, pretty close here, and I have 4 kids, 3 in college, and 1 in high school. The thing that makes me feel so good this morning, my 1 in high school, 17, I just finished 6 years of teaching my kids to drive. And I cannot be more thrilled about that. I don't ever want to sit on that side of the car again. And so it's good to get past that. But it's great time with your kids. Let's call it that. That'll be great. So, but I love family ministry. I love leadership. I love the idea of working with other people to accomplish something. Collaboration is something that's near and dear to my heart. I want to never make a decision in a vacuum. And so I like to include our teams in that as well, and just try to accomplish what we can through that, especially right now in a tough environment. But it's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to be back here. Brad's going to be over there. We're going to kind of moderate from behind so that you guys can focus on them. But Doug, we're starting with you. We thought we'd start with some icebreaker, easy questions. Then we're going to get into some deep stuff. But 20 seconds on the clock. We're going to start with you. We're going to go all the way through. This is the first just kind of rapid fire question. Give me a book, a blog, a podcast, or something that you're currently reading that's helping you as a leader, but maybe even personally too?
Well, I'm glad to go first because I get to be the first one to say Canoeing the Mountains. If you're not reading that, I would encourage you strongly to get that book. Canoeing the Mountains is a great book right now, Todd Bolsinger. But I want to give you an old book that I still refer to, which is by Mark Miller, and it's on teams. And so I would encourage you to check that out. He has a series of those books that I like. And then I'm going to throw in Andy Stanley podcast because Andy's always got something interesting
So what was
to say.
it? First book?
The first one, Canoeing the Mountains. It's a story of Lewis and Clark going across to the west, thinking they were going to canoe all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and got to the Colorado Mountains and went, we have a problem. And everything had to change, and they dealt with the change. So
Very cool. Thanks.
All right, so a book recently that I've been learning from is called Lessons from the Mouse. It's about Disney and kind of how they work with folks. One of the things that really struck me in that was they were talking about empathy, and empathy being, how you feel what people feel, which is how I've always understood empathy. But they also said that there's another piece to it. There's two things to empathy, and that is you have a cognitive empathy as well, where you kind of think what they're thinking, and you can kind of see where that's going. And it was really neat. And so they talked about compassion being what you do with that, like your action from that. And I thought that was really, really, really awesome. There's some examples of that. I also spent an unusual amount of time on YouTube, which is, not as academic, but I do learn a lot from YouTube as well, just from fun things I like to watch. So.
That's awesome.
I'm in the stage of listening to podcasts right now, so I will say Andy Stanley, Leadership Podcast is one of my favorites. His generally go for 20, 25 minutes, so it's really easy if I have some downtime at the restaurant or on my way home that I can listen to it. Also, Entree Leadership is another podcast that's really, really good. The podcasts are a little longer, but they're great. And then Mark Miller is actually from Chick-fil-A, and so his whole series, he's got Secretive Teams, Chestnut Checkers, lots of different team building ones. So Chick-fil-A has that whole library of them, but you can definitely find those on Amazon. So anything Mark Miller, he has study guides as well, and so it's great to do with teams. So it's really geared toward team building together.
Well, I'm currently reading Managing the Nonprofit Organization by Peter Drucker, who is a guru in leadership and systematic change and continuous improvement. And the interesting thing about it, he does a comparison of leading in a nonprofit as opposed to leading a business. And it's a big difference because everybody I work with in the Ark of Katy are volunteers. And no, we have some paid folks, but primarily volunteers. And so reading through that, also we subscribe to the Executive Service Corps of Houston. And right now they have some free webinars for nonprofits. And we've been listening to those about fundraising and how to handle funding issues during this difficult time. And so, but I will say my very first leadership book, this is a long time ago, was Leadership as an Art by Max Dupree. It's short. I like short, easy read books. And it's a great book, and I've given that to several folks who are new leaders.
For the past couple months, I've been trying to understand questions of justice in our broader culture. So Tim Keller in a blog said the best book he knows on the topic is Alistair McIntyre. His book, Whose Justice, Which Rationality, that looks at competing definitions of justice. It's a dense, this guy's a British philosopher, it's a dense read. Yesterday I had Dr. Steve Jones try to explain to me aspects of Greek philosophy that I do not understand well. So it's an excellent book, it's quite a challenging read. I really enjoy Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History. Also, How I Built This is a great podcast for entrepreneurs, so I listen to those on a regular basis.
That's awesome. By the way, what about you? You have any good books you read this year?
Good books. Man, I've got so many books we can go through. There's a bunch of Jocko Willink books that I've been reading lately,
Okay.
but one podcast that we've been just consuming is they talk about race and justice and all that stuff. Me and my wife. It is. I'm gonna get it wrong, but you can figure it out. But it's the White Parent podcast. It's talking about white privilege and parenting and all that stuff. There's some stuff that you don't agree with. There's some stuff that you do, but it gets you thinking, and it's helped us have some great conversations and how we lead. It's really really good.
Good. One of my favorites probably in the last 45 days is a book called Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that, it's really good. I think part of my background as 20 years in the military is sort of self-discipline and routine and habits are key to being a leader, right? Because you've got to be able to lead yourself before you can lead anyone. So for you all, as you think about individually your habits, your discipline, your routine, this time, Chris, we'll start with you and then head to the right. What are some things that you practice in your life to help you be an effective leader?
Yeah, great question. For the past 25 years, I've kind of set it a goal to read through the Bible at least once a year. And that's, I think, kind of one of my core spiritual disciplines that I encourage my kids to do, just reading through the Bible every day, every year. I try to keep up with Brad in CrossFit workouts. That's another one. No, physical activity workouts, for a season it was running, then cycling. Lately it's been CrossFit-style workouts. I also try to take one day a month. It would be great if it was one day a week, but one day a month where I get away and spend a day with the Lord. So I use Lanier Theological Library in Northwest Houston, and I get away to try to hear from the Lord. And if I am not doing that, I feel it after a couple months. And so that solitude, silence, those disciplines are a very important part of my spiritual life.
Many of you remember Stephen Covey and the work that Stephen Covey did, and he always talked about balance in your life, and always talked about 4 different areas, the social, emotional, the physical, intellectual, and spiritual. I kind of rearranged his because he gave spiritual equal to intellectual and physical and social, emotional, and so to me, spiritual is the foundation. And unless you have a strong spiritual life, then you're going to be out of balance. I don't care what you try to do, you're going to be out of balance. So that's what I try to do in my life. Exercise, it comes and goes. But staying involved in like reading books and like reading the one on nonprofits right now, trying to keep abreast of what's new. And that's such. And I will say that when I was in education, one habit that I had was that when things got really, really tough in the office, and I was an executive director for special education, and was getting caught up in the minutia of leadership, I need to be reminded of what my mission was. And so I would tell my secretary, I'm going out to a preschool classroom, and I'm going to sit in the preschool classroom and let the kids climb all over my lap. And that reminded me why I'm doing this, why I'm taking angry parent phone calls and things of that nature. So,
I agree with Mr. Fred, but I'll put it toward the restaurant. I probably have a couple people that I connect with almost daily, if not weekly, to help hold me accountable to what I have set standards at work for. We also have our guests that remind us daily that what our standards need to be. But it's like what Mr. Fred said, if I do get that bad phone call, it's jumping in and hanging out with the team and reminding myself why I do what I do. But technically or tactically, I probably once a week, I'll look at the schedule for the next week for myself and just make sure I have things planned out. For me, it's a lot of interacting with my leadership team and follow through on our standards and our systems and our coaching for that team so that the store does well when I'm not there. So I could get sidetracked really easily. So sitting down with them and making sure that they know, hey, this is the day that I'm going to meet with you. Not only is it on their schedule, but I've verbally told them, so that holds me more accountable, and that's how my brain works to do that. And then Devin, my husband, does a great job to make sure if I said I was going to be home at a certain time, that he's reminding me to be at home with the family. So I have a tendency to want to make sure that the store's going well all the time. So to have the personal side where now my kids, that they're old enough, they can very verbally tell me, "You told me you'd be home for dinner." So I try very hard, if I make a commitment to the family, that I'm home, and they very much remind me if I'm not.
So I'm going to kind of tell you sort of, in a short amount of time, my kind of journey with this. Is when I first started Wood Creek, I was kind of, I guess, out of balance. I was working a lot. I went from an AEP, as an assistant principal, to a principal of a brand new school. So they gave me a principal. And by the way, the district never did that after me, so I don't know if I had something to do with that or whatever, but I figured I could do everything my peers could do. It just took me 4 times longer, is all it was. And so my wife, who was super supportive, would bring my daughter at the time, my son wasn't born yet, up to the school, and we would eat dinner there, and I would just working all the time. When my daughter started calling it Daddy's house, I started getting real convicted about this, right? And so trying to figure out how to be there, right? And so over time, what's happened is that in the morning, I'm an early riser, so I'm usually up, 4:30 to 5. I go for a run. I come back. I read. Usually, start off with the Bible, read the Bible, pray, and then I goof, and then I tell myself I'm goofing off, right? And so that's when I spend time on YouTube, as I referenced earlier, and that's really fun. So I'll get into just kind of like things I'm interested in, but I love watching like CEOs of other companies, and I'll be learning about something else that's not even related to education, and then all of a sudden I get an idea. So I get some crazy ideas, when I'm not thinking about things. Also, during the school day, I learned how to manage my time a lot better. I had a mentor tell me that you want to go home on time and be there with your family, but you wear the fact that you stayed here late as a badge of honor and brag about it. And I was like, well, that's, and he said, really, it's just a demonstration of your inability to get things done during the day. And I was like, well, it doesn't sound so good when you say it that way. And so I went to some trainings, learned, and I've gotten to where during the school day, I try to focus, what are the things that only I as a principal can do? And what are the things that anybody else could do? So I try to use my team to do some of those other things so that I can focus on only the things that I can do.
That's great. I'm thinking through all the things I need to do different after listening to the 4 of you now. But for me, reading and rest are key. If I'm reading regularly and I'm resting regularly, typically the rest of the disciplines are falling into line. And when I'm not doing those things, I can recognize that a lot of the other disciplines are not as well. One thing a tool that I use is, it's nothing new, but the way I've done it is a little maybe over the top, but I have a to-do sheet, and a lot of us who have a lot of things to do, we love the to-do sheets. If you're like me, I love to check things off, and I am one of those people that will write it down after I've done it, just so I can mark it off. Just do it, because it feels really good. But what I've learned over the years is to use that in a very different way, and so I'm constantly attempting to update that to-do sheet in a way that functions as a standard and a discipline for me. And so I have projects listed in one corner. I've got different areas of responsibility listed throughout the page. I've got a place where I just put ideas that come to me that I want to come back to. And on the back of that is all communication. And so I've got listed on the back all the names of people that I interact with on a regular basis. The people that report to me, the people that I report to, the people that I interact with as peers often. And so if I need to, a lot of times what we find in leadership is one thing always connects to 12 more things. And so I try to connect all the dots on there. And so if I did that without the discipline of that to-do sheet, I don't think I would do it very well. And so I've learned, and that's just for me. Obviously, it's unique to each person. But that helps me communicate well, remember what I need to communicate. When I run into someone in the hallway, I'm amazed at how many times a hallway conversation can be just as valuable as a meeting. And when I run into someone in the hallway and I've been thinking through my mind, these are some things with this person that I want to, sometimes you can have hallway conversations that just, I don't know, maybe our guards are down, maybe we're standing up, it just feels a little less trapped. But that's a tool that's helped me, and it's kept me disciplined, because without that, I would just kind of be all over the place. But these guys had great things.
That's great. That's great. Audience, any questions? I wanted to just start there with some icebreaker questions, so you can not only get an understanding of where they work and what they deal with, but also personally what leadership looks like to them. So any questions from you guys to them about anything they've said? Okay, so what we're going to do now is, as Bobby mentioned earlier, is we're going to move to some bigger picture stuff. And what you see on the stage is you see education, you see nonprofit, you see corporate business, you see church. And so the past 6 months have looked different to them than even you, right? But there's some principles that they're going to share that's going to be extremely relative and useful to you. And so this time, Doug, we'll start over there. And guys, this is sort of back and forth between you all. Won't necessarily go down, but feel free to share. Is when you look back the last 6 months, everything rises and falls with leadership. What's been your biggest challenge, right? COVID caused challenges. COVID wasn't your challenge, right? What's been your biggest challenge? And with this one, I'll go back. We'll go down the line because I want to hear. So Doug, we'll start with you. We'll talk later how you dealt with that, but just verbalize what's been your biggest challenge. And it could be personal and it could be professional, or you could share both.
As I thought about this question, there's so many things that came to my mind, because everything has felt like a challenge the last 6 months. But I think the thing that jumps out at me is my biggest challenge has been staying out of my people's way. The team that I'm trying to support, we've met more and longer than we normally do because of all the things going on and trying to wrap our minds around, well, now we're hearing this, and now we're hearing this, and this might happen, but this will for sure happen, and it never does. But anyway, we all these things we're trying to adapt to. We've met a lot, and the challenge for me is to lead in a way that is constructive for my team, but not. Some of them are here, and they would probably say I've really failed miserably at this. I feel like I have a lot, but to not get in their way, to be able to lead and then allow my team to go do the things that they need to do, because at the end of the day, that's where the change happens. And I have to realize that, especially in a highly adaptive season like COVID, my leadership has to spur something on and not just be the beginning and the ending, where I get everybody in a meeting and we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk, and then we never do anything, but then we talk and we talk and we talk. I think the danger is to think that could feel good to me, like I'm really doing a lot, but in the end, the result is not. For the kids and the families of our church, that's not going to be a good end result for them. So I want to stay out of my team's way and try to let them do the things that they know how to do.
So COVID has really disrupted the education industry. And I hear you laughing, so that's kind of an understatement. And this happens in industries a lot, A big tidal wave will come of some sort. And companies, organizations either get devoured by it or they ride it. And I told my folks, I want to ride this, right? Let's do this. Now, I think the biggest hurdle or the biggest thing we've been dealing with is honestly fear. Now, I know that probably when I say fear, you probably have seen a lot of people have fear with COVID, right? And or leaving their house. And we got people on both sides, everything from a hoax to I haven't opened a window in 6 months, right? And yes, that has definitely been a part of it. But also, one of the things that we struggle with, at least at my school, and I have about 140-ish type staff, and we have about almost 1,300 kids and a whole lot of families. And so it's a lot of people. One of the things that we struggle with in education, at least with my staff, is perfectionism. The perfectionism keeps them from taking risks and doing the things that we know we need to do, right? Last January, we were really pushing some new methods to do reading, and it was really stretching some people. And I told them, guys, don't be such a perfectionist. You need to learn how to ish things. Learn how to ish it, right? And so just get in there and get it done. It's going to be messy. I don't like it when it's messy. I know that. That's why I'm talking to you, right? But you need to learn how to just get in there, make it messy, and then when it's a hot mess, we pick it up and we fix it and we do it along the way. That's what we need to do. And then COVID hit. And then we did online school, right? And we learned how to do that in about 4 days. And so if we ever had an opportunity to ish something, there it was. And we did. We ished away, and it was a hot mess, right? And so we are still ishing things along. And so it's been a real blessing, though, to teach and kind of like lean on my staff. And I've told them, flexible is too rigid. I stole this from Omar. Flexible is too rigid. I need you to be fluid. We need to be fluid. So I kept saying, we're fluid, and we found the water drop emoji, and yeah. And so that, I think that's been our biggest challenge is just dealing with the fear from not just COVID, but also from within on wanting everything to be just perfect before we do anything new. And guys, that's just not possible. The learning process is a messy process.
I would say for us, it was probably consistency. So we've never had to really shut down. I mean, we closed the dining rooms. I think we first started with the playground, and then we went to closing the dining rooms, and Chick-fil-A was still trying to figure out as a whole what we should do. And so they let us have the right to close when we felt like it, and to a certain degree. And even now, it's our choice to open or close the dining room. But I would say the messaging to our guests, the messaging to our team, and the messaging to our kids' families, just the consistency with that, because we deal with a couple thousand guests every day, and in order to make sure that they're served correctly and safely for their safety and for my team's safety, the messaging that we had to put out and that we had to quickly formulate in those first couple months was something that we did weekly. Even with Chick-fil-A Inc., they messaged us operators very frequently and tried to update our systems that they gave us very quickly. And so I think that's been the most challenging is the consistency. Like, as soon as we relaxed a little bit or didn't talk about it, our safety measures didn't necessarily go out of the door, but they became really relaxed. I would walk in and everyone would scatter because they're not supposed to be sitting, on break. We're all friends, we're all family at Chick-fil-A, and so all the kids are sitting, right next to each other where we had spread all the chairs out, and so I walk in and then everyone scatters. So it's just the leaders get tired of that consistent messaging. So it was really encouraging the leaders to follow through, even though they're like, oh, I told them already. And I was like, well, just wait till you have kids. You tell them every day to brush your teeth or to look both ways before they cross the street, right? Well, you do it because you love them and you want your kids to grow up healthy and happy. So it's the same thing I coach my leaders all the time, especially during COVID. Like, we're trying to keep the team healthy, which means they can still work, which means the parents are okay with them working. And I had a lot of kids come back because of the messaging that we did do. And so I did weekly ones where I personally sent a message out and I said, show your parents, show whoever you live with so that they know the systems that we have created. And so we had 10 to 14 different steps that we have to do every day. We used to have to wash our hands like every 30 minutes, the timer went off. We have to wash our hands, we have to wear gloves. Because of a glove shortage, now it's every hour we have to wash our hands. But all this messaging and the consistency was just the hardest part, and just really loving on the leaders because they're the ones that had to really help us push that through and just really encourage them. So that was probably the most difficult thing for us.
So just to give you a little background before I answer the question about the Ark of Katy, we're a very small nonprofit organization. Our annual budget's probably about $300,000, and so it's very small. And we serve about 50 adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in our day hab program, and then we have monthly socials as well, and other activities. So the challenge that we face, and as I said, we have some paid staff, but for what we pay them, they might as well be volunteers. And then we have a coordinator. We don't have an executive director, so as the board president, I kind of step in as the executive director. And so the challenge has been, how do we continue to serve what we refer to them as participants. We didn't like the word clients or whatever, so we refer to them as participants. How do we serve our participants? Because our participants, being the age that they are, 18, and we have 18 up to 60 years of age, and they are the most susceptible when you look at the population for COVID. Not only their age, but also their disabilities. And so the challenge is, how do we serve them? Because they're at home, they like to be with their peers, and so how do we go about serving them? And so the challenge was coming up with new ways of providing a day hab program. And I think we're going to get to more of that later on as we get down to the questions. But the thing that I kept reminding the staff, and of course our challenge was we had to furlough staff. And like I said, fortunately our staff isn't dependent upon the money that they make at the Ark of Katy, or they'd be in the soup line. But still, it was income that they were accustomed to receiving. So we did have to furlough them. We did make application for PPP funds, and we got enough for 1 month to do that. And that was a challenge in of itself, is writing that application to get those funds to make payroll. But what I continue to remind my board and to remind those who are working, that we have a mission, and as long as we keep our focus on the mission, we're going to be okay. And we'll come up with ways, and we did, and we'll talk about that later, come up with ways to continue to serve our students, participants.
So in our ministry, we have really big events every August. In Houston, we rent a bunch of school buses, and we take international students from Rice and the University of Houston on a tour of Houston. So I go, I'm a bus guide, so I'm singing Deep in the Heart of Texas. I cannot sing. But I'm teaching these students from Iran and China and India, and we're clapping along and singing Deep in the Heart of Texas. Well, we meet thousands of students. We probably meet 60 to 70,000 international students every August, and that core of students becomes the group of students that we minister to throughout the year. Higher education has been deeply impacted, as you know, by COVID. So typically, the U.S. grants about 23,000 visas to new Chinese students every year. This year, you want to guess what that number is? From 23,000 to 500. So our staff members are going, how are we supposed to do our ministry? I mean, campuses that typically have 2,000 new international students will have 100 to 200. So we've had to adapt and learn to do things through Zoom, through Instagram and social media. Our mantra in our ministry has been, let's experiment and let's pray a lot. So on the point of experimentation, something that I've tried to really emphasize is let's celebrate our failures, right? Because if we try something and it doesn't go well, at least we have tried something new. And the things that we experiment and go well, let's spread the word. Let's let other teams know what you have done well. And so those are two things we're really encouraging. Let's experiment and celebrate even things that aren't successful, and then let's pray like crazy. And part of that is, as a leader of a Christian organization, we really have to keep our people's eyes on Jesus in this season. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is keep our eyes on Jesus in this season.
I'd be remiss as a nonprofit to say funding is a challenge. You still have your drive. I'm waiting for you to open up your store so I don't have to go through drive-through all the time. But anyway, okay. But funding, funding is for a nonprofit. We had to cancel our major fundraising, our gala that brings in about $80,000 to $100,000 a year. We had to cancel that. So we've had to take it. The challenge is, how do we continue? And many of our participants are on waivers. In other words, they receive Medicaid funding, and we contract with their provider, but the government doesn't pay for virtual day programming. So we've been trying to talk to legislators and not gotten very far. But, you know, other states are doing that. Why aren't we doing that in Texas? And it's just a different way of doing day programming. So why not fund for virtual day programming? So those are challenges. And it brings, you get a little scared when you think about, when you look at your bank balance. We just had a board meeting this last week. And, we're working in the red every month. And so fortunately, we had the foresight to have a healthy bank account. And so we're able to go at least through this year. And so we're looking at other ways to raise funds as well.
Well, thanks, Fred. I know, thank you all for sharing your challenges. And I know for most of us, one of the big challenges is planning. Planning, we've the last 6 months is non-existent. We'll plan and then we know it's going to change. But this isn't for everybody. It'll just whoever wants to chime in, or Ronnie, we'll start with you. So I'll give you time to think about your answer. But when it comes to planning, one thing that we've seen is not to talk about the negative, because we could talk about all the missed meetings and opportunities and events that got canceled, but I want to talk about the positive. Here at Kingsland, one of the positive things with planning is we've been trying to get our small groups to do attendance online for years, and COVID has accelerated that to now all of our groups are doing online attendance, which is a small little win. But what are some things in your planning that because of COVID have accelerated it? You've actually seen it succeed. Don't talk about the negative, but what are some things that have been positive when it comes to that in your context?
Well, one, I think, big obvious thing is obviously teachers are using technology a lot now, right? It's a lot. And in fact, each year I would have them, one of your goals should be something on technology. This year I was like, you're good. You're good. Yeah, unless you want it. If you want to, sure. But otherwise, I'm not forcing you. It's good. In education, it's a funny thing. Our business is learning, but our industry learns very slowly, which is the funniest thing. We push against 100 years of tradition all the time. And so it's always like, if you think about like the problem, and then you don't think about any logistics, and you just think about what would be a great solution to that problem. Because most of the time we beat those solutions down with the logistics. Don't do that. Just think about what would be a great solution. And then you come up with, it would be this. And you think, wow, that would be a great. So how could you do that? Well, there's no way we could do that. Well, why not? Right? And so then we have this conversation about making that happen. And we're more likely to make that happen if we put the logistics last. Right? And so what COVID and what this environment has really forced us to do, and really, again, just trying to push, as a principal, I've been pushing against this for so long, is that it's allowed us to boil down what is the most important when we're talking about student growth, when we're talking about student learning. What's the most important? And because we're not able to do this, like in person, or we're not able to do this, and maybe we are doing some in person, but it's not everybody. And so what's the most important thing? And so it's really forcing us to, and the other great thing is, I shouldn't say great thing, but it's kind of the great thing, you said positive, is that we don't really have this in our tradition. So it's not that we can go back and look at and say, well, let's do it like that. Because I think this has to do, again, with teachers' perfectionism. They want to play it safe. They want to play it safe. And so when we come back and we say, here's the things we do. Well, who else is doing that? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Does it matter? Who else is doing it? And so now we're having to rethink, and COVID has really caused us to kind of like boil these things down so that we can try to address some of these issues that we've been dealing with for years related to learning and student growth. And we're kind of in this, everyone's kind of on unsteady ground. Everyone's kind of getting used to being on unsteady ground. And so why not just try this thing then? Right? And so we're actually making some headway on some things that I've been talking about for many, many years, but just was making headway very, very slowly. Because sometimes, even though we don't say this, we value tradition over learning. And really, what I'm trying to do, and what my staff and what we all want to do is, We want to value learning over everything in my industry.
That's really good, Ronnie, and I'll jump in just before we continue. Is how many of you have been in those meetings where you start to dream and then someone goes immediately to how we're going to do that? Some of you may be the how to do that people, right? You're like, yeah, Leslie's like putting her head down, right? Okay. As a leader, I love what Ronnie said. Okay, here's the deal. It's for you to set that tone. We'll have meetings and I'll write the word how on the board and put a line through it. We are not talking about the how. We're going to dream for a moment, because if the dream is good enough and you buy into the what you're going to do and the why you're going to do it, you'll figure out the how, right? So I love what he said. So just as a leadership tip is set that temperature in the beginning of the meeting, and then let your people know we'll deal with that, right? But not right now. So thanks.
Say real quick about folks like Leslie, since you pointed her out. Folks like her. Sorry. But here's the thing. That kind of thinking is valuable at a different time. That's right. So it's not a matter of don't think that way. It's a matter of let's think about that a little bit later, because we're going to need that. We're going to need that. But right now we're in the clouds. Eventually when we get down to the blades of grass, we need Leslie and people like her.
Something that we have realized in our ministry when it comes to like solutions in the how in the season, a lot of times what we typically do is our staff teams sit around and leadership teams sit around and we try to brainstorm, what can we do? How can we solve this problem? Something that we've been forced to do in the season, and I shake my head that it's taken us this long to figure this out. We're turning to our students, our international students, to help solve the problems that they are faced with. So instead of our staff figuring out what our students need, we're asking our students what they need. So back in April, our leader in New York City emailed me and said, hey, Chris, I have this idea for this hackathon. Let's gather students for 48 hours. They stay up all night and they help us tackle our biggest problems. It's like, okay, let's try it. So in June, we had 25 students from Ivy League schools from across the United States, students from all over the world, and they help us tackle some of our most significant questions. They stayed up all night, I guess it was a lot of Red Bull and coffee. They were on WeChat. We don't even know how they did it. And at the end, they gave us presentations on their solutions to our problems. And I think that's something really significant in this season is we've realized that we need to turn to the students, the one that we're serving, to help us solve our problems rather than thinking that we can, as staff or as leaders, solve them. One of our leaders in North Carolina told me, he's like, COVID's been one of the best things for student leadership at UNC Chapel Hill, because finally our students are stepping up to lead in ways they never would have led otherwise. So that's been a big win, is our students starting to lead in new ways.
I would say for us, we're only a year old, and so I was told my team, because it was about 6 months in when COVID happened to us, maybe even 5 months in for the restaurant opening. I said COVID has really helped us in our training. With my experience, it takes about 2 years for a team to really work well together, especially with the complexity of our restaurant. So normally the first year, you actually turn that team over. About 70% of the people that we normally start with aren't there at that 1 year. Luckily, I was at, I think I had 80% of my people still there today. And you're still training, and then you're retraining another team the second year generally in our business. But COVID actually helped expedite or speed up our training because we could only focus on drive-through. And so normally only the best of the best get to do the drive-through because we have to be quick, we have to have great order accuracy, the team has to be very smiley, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer to train 100 people to do that. But with COVID, we were actually, since we closed down the dining room and only focusing on curbside and drive-through, everyone on the team is proficient with all things drive-through. And it's very complicated. I mean, anytime y'all can walk in and I'll show you all the things that we have to do to make sure that drive-through set up accurately and is done correctly. But I keep telling the team, like, we're so blessed to actually have COVID happen because the whole team knows how to do this. And going back to having the dining room back open will probably cause another complexity that the team won't know how to do, and that used to be the easiest part of the business. And now drive-through is probably the easiest one for them. But I would say, like, the win is for us is drive-through, and I'm sure you can go into a lot of the Chick-fil-A's here in Katy. Why did it take us so long to pop up tents at Katy Green and Cinco Ranch and Mason Road? I worked there for years, and all of those teams worked outside in the heat for years, but COVID happened, and we realized that we could rent a tent and pop it up in the parking lot so that the team would be cooler during the summer months. Why didn't we think about that years ago? So a lot of the systems that Chick-fil-A's across the U.S. have done has been because of COVID. And a lot of things we'll do again and again as the months go forward, even when hopefully we lose some of the restrictions with COVID, just because they've created lots of new systems or new ideas for us to do.
Actually, our planning has accelerated during this time of COVID. We were in the midst of strategic planning right before COVID hit, but we didn't stop. And I told my board we can't stop because COVID's going to end. I mean, we may never be back to the normal we're used to, but we're not always going to live under the umbrella of COVID. So, when we can get back to full operation, then we need to be ready to go. So we're going to continue to work on our strategic plan. And our board works, we have committees within our board. And our fund development committee, we'd never had a fund development committee before. And that came out in the strategic plan, which was odd. A nonprofit that relies on donations and funds from the outside never had a fund development committee. So I encouraged them to keep working and gave them deadlines. And our first funding appeal letter went out this week. Kingsland, you got one. And if anybody wants one, give me your address and I'll send it to you. But we've done that. The other thing is that because we had to look at different ways of providing day hab, we told our program coordinator and our instructors, you have free reign to plan what you see needs to happen to provide that day hab. And so, Zoom can be a really positive thing or it can be a curse. But we have, our instructors took Zoom. They've created Zoom, and we were Zooming 5 days a week. Our participants who have intellectual disabilities, they caught on to Zoom just like that. And they love Zoom. They love being able to connect with their peers that they hadn't seen for months. And as a result of that, our instructors came back and said, if we can do Zoom for our participants, why can't we do Zoom for other folks out in the community who may not fit into our day hab program, but do have some level of disability? So we've started another program, which is a Zoom program, that we're going to be advertising and recruiting folks to be a part of that program as well. Because we have limited, our building is, the fire marshal is limited to 40 participants, so we're limited to the number of folks who can come in. But we know there are other folks out there, other individuals with disabilities that need to connect. So we're going to work on that and provide that through Zoom because they don't feel comfortable coming in with our participants with their level of disability. And so, but it gives them an opportunity to connect with their peers also.
Hey, I want to shift gears for just a second and talk about leading with vision. And before I do that, let me just thank you all for being here. What a blessing to our church and to the community. Not only the panels, but also the people in this room. What a blessing, what a gift we have to be able to learn from one another. So thank you for being here. We talk a lot about vision and mission at Kingsland, and I think that's probably, as much as we always have, that's probably increased exponentially the last 6 months. One of the unofficial mantras we've sort of lived by is when we cannot give our people certainty, we can give them clarity. And we really tried to do that. So we've probably leaned more on our mission and vision in the absence of being able to lean on strategy or specifics in the last 6 months than we have in a long time. For example, I've probably spoken twice as much about core values than I have. They've been on the wall. We speak of them, but they become profoundly important in giving the reasons why we do what we do. So I would be curious, from your leadership perspective, what have you learned about leading with vision during this time? What has changed about leading with vision during this time? And how would you help someone who might be here who struggles in that area?
Doug, we'll start with you.
As I thought about this, this is really at the root of leadership, is understanding who you are and what you're about. It's just been exposed during this time in such a powerful way. I think of the quote, and I never get it quite right, and I've heard it different ways, but if you want to build ships, don't divide men into teams and send them into forests to cut wood. Give them a love and a passion for the open sea. Is that you can motivate people to do things, but it's more motivating to cast a vision of where you want to go, of who you want to be. And so I think this season has really caused us to go back to the root of who we are. You're talking about, in education, knowing that learning is, let's just kind of bring it down to learning. For us, in our world, it's discipleship and specifically family discipleship. And so we've had to come back to that and say, okay, as we rewrite systems, as we look at things that aren't working, we've got to start with an understanding of who we are. Now, I'll say this, I think that as believers, we have to start with an understanding of who we are in Christ. I think that has to come first. If we try to build an organization or we try to build a ministry built upon who that ministry is, or there's vision there, without giving attention to who you are in Christ, you're going to have a whole lot of people that are trying to fulfill their significance in other ways. And so I think we start there, and we understand that Christ has given us an incredible new creation, that we are new in Christ, and that we are forgiven and we are free and all that, because that plays into that season of, boy, if there's ever been a season when failure should be accepted, it ought to be now. So let's dream and go through that. So I think if vision is ever an issue, this is a great time to sit down with your team and say, what are we about? What do we do? What's important to us? Who are we going to be? And for that, it's important. Now, I'll put it in our context a little bit with a team of teams. Is I want us to have, at Houston's First, I want us to have a next-gen identity. I want us to have a family ministry identity. I want us to have a easy transition identity. What I mean by that is I want parents to be able to move from preschool to children and children to students and not feel like they changed churches, because everybody's talking a different language and everything looks different and everything, so I want to keep those transitions. So there's a next-gen identity that we want to have, but I don't want that to rob our children's ministry of what is unique to them. So our First Kids ministry, we have some of their team here today. I want them to have an identity. So I think the challenge during this time, and what you're speaking to, Pastor, is that you've got a church mission statement, and then you've got ministry mission statements that have to fit within that. And that's where that clarity is so important about who we are. We've started a new thing at our church called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. And one of the things about that is it creates alignment of mission and values. And so an example of this, and it's the fall, so this is kind of an appropriate example. If you think of a football team, college football team, and that coach's value is to win games, is to win the conference, is maybe to go to win a national championship. He may say, to do that, I believe that our offense, which was 10th in the league, needs to be in the top 5. And that's a goal I'm setting to reach our objective. Well, then the offensive coordinator may look at that and go, well, if we're going to be top 5, then I need this and this and this and this to happen. And each of the coaches under him who has each of those responsibilities say, well, then if I'm going to see this happening, I need to work with my players to make sure that, and so it creates alignment. So I think it's not just a matter of, because I think especially in the church, and I can't speak to nonprofits and others, but I think specifically in the church, you can find that we have a lot of mission statements, we have a lot of mission values, but they may not all align. They may not align for the purpose of the local body of the church that's trying to work together to accomplish ministry. And so I think one of the things we can do right now, if you're talking missions or mission and you're talking value and that clarity, is to speak to other ministries, speak to other areas, and make sure that we're working together so that our missions will accomplish a greater goal. That word that we love, synergy, when it all comes together and we're working together well. I think that's something we're really trying to accomplish right now.
So our mission statement at the school is that all students will grow a full school year within a school year. Now you may hear that and be like, duh. Right? But here's the thing, I've never actually seen a school do it, and I've never been able to see a school actually be able to show that they're doing that. Because sort of how schools are set up is we're kind of set up at a floor level, like we teach you at a sort of a floor level. And if you're above that floor level, we just kind of tend to keep you busy while we work with other people who aren't. And so that's kind of how schools are sort of structured. And so if we're going to have all kids grow a full school year within a school year, the problem to that is that all kids come to us at a different level, right? It makes it tough. And so when when I'm talking to teachers, one of the things that I kind of talk to them about is that, who would not be for that? Who's not for, all kids growing a full school year within a school year? And of course, we're all for that. We're all for that. And here's the thing, it's a moral imperative. It's not just kind of a cool thing we want to do, right? Like what we're doing is a calling. Like many of us are called by God to do this. So it's not about clocking it in and then clocking out, right? It's about getting there and helping kids to grow a full school year within a school year. And so here's the other thing I'll say. Excellence is not something that happens on accident. And when I say excellence, I mean achieving or getting closer to your vision. Because we haven't achieved it yet. But by golly, we're getting closer and closer. And I'm telling you what, it has taken a fanatical focus on this vision to even start to make some headway on it. I have just become an absolute fanatic about this. And so this guides all conversations. How's this helping kids grow? If we do this thing, how's this helping kids grow? So we find ourselves saying no to a lot of fantastic things that aren't going to help us with our kids growing, so that we can say yes to a very few things that hopefully we can do very, very well with fanatical focus on those very few things to help these kids grow. And so here's the thing. Part of the question was, how does a vision, help you as a leader? Well, as an elementary school, I'm big for an elementary school. My school is big, always has been. They have built, they meaning the district, have built 7 schools to relieve my school throughout the years. So it's big, it grows. Well, if everybody is working on the same thing, you're more likely to actually achieve that, right? So if everybody buys into that, and I'm not talking about, oh yeah, they know it, but they buy into it. This is part of my purpose. I'll go back and remind them, why did you get into teaching? Why are you doing this? Did you do it for the summers? Because if you did, you're not going to last long, right? Did you do it for the money? Because again, right? It's a calling. The people who go in there and stick with it, it's too hard. It's way too hard to do for any other reason other than the calling. And so, for those that struggle, and for me, when I struggled with, focus and, when I first started my school, I kind of basically did it like my principal, like my mentor, the one that I worked under. And then after a couple of years, I realized everything I've set up, I don't like. And so I started to kind of find my voice. And so here's what I did. And so this is what I would encourage you to do. Pray and ask God for wisdom. He'll give it to you if you ask. He's the one that put you there, right? He might as well give you the direction for it. Why would he put you there and then all of a sudden you try to do it on your own, right? So pray and ask God for wisdom. Discover that purpose and kind of ask yourself, what is it as this organization, Because obviously I can do things with this organization that I can't just do on my own. What is it that you want to accomplish?
You guys, just keeping that vision and mission is vital for us to survive. If you don't have that, when things are taken away, what do you stand on? And that's what we stand on. So appreciate y'all so much. As we shift gears, Doug, you've already mentioned some leadership lessons, and Fred, you've mentioned some leadership lessons, but more specifically, you guys lead teams and you oversee people. A question I have, and I'm going to start with Chris, so think about your answer for the next few seconds. Thinking of your team, what has been the top maybe one or two most difficult decisions you've had to make regarding personnel, and walk us through some of those decisions?
I think when you're leading a team that has different views and perspectives on best solutions or how to move forward, the challenge of listening well and representing the opposite side fairly is a big leadership challenge. I think in general, we tend to, well, let me speak for myself. I don't tend to be a great listener. As someone's speaking, I'm thinking, what am I going to say next? But truly listening well to what other people are saying, I think that's been one of the biggest leadership challenges. Like part of the national conversation, our broader national issues as the United States, and also as teams, just when there's two strongly held positions in camps and the teams that we lead, how do we nuance our leadership? How do we listen well to both sides? And then in the midst of that, how do we lead courageously? I think that's one challenge.
I think the biggest challenge that we had during this time of COVID, if you work for a nonprofit, if you volunteer for a nonprofit, you've got a big heart. And many times your decisions come from the heart. And there are times when decisions have to come from the head. And so we were having to make the decision to furlough staff. We had shut down the program. We weren't getting, tuition for the day programming. We weren't getting money from the state. Our biggest fundraiser we had to cancel. So we were struggling. And so we had a board meeting, and I have a great board, and they all buy into the mission. And they wouldn't be on the board unless they had a real desire to help participants or individuals with intellectual disabilities. And so we brought up the discussion about, okay, we're going to have to furlough staff. I mean, we just don't have the money to do it. And some of the board said, yeah, but, we could just keep them on and pay them this. And that's when, as a leader, you have to come in and make the hard decisions. And as much as I hated to furlough staff, I had to question, well, what are they going to do? We don't have participants coming in. Okay, well, they could be planning for when they come back. Well, we don't know when they're coming back. And so, I had to make that difficult decision as, yes, we're going to furlough the staff. And, we'll look for alternative funding. We'll apply for the PPP funds, and we did, and got about $35,000 that we were able to bring them back for about a month. But that was a hard decision. And as a leader, sometimes you want to lead from the heart, but there are times when you have to lead from the head and make those tough decisions.
Courtney, what about you?
I'll agree with them. I mean, the toughest decision that I've had to make for personnel in the last 6 months is we had a leader with us who had been with us. I brought her over from one of my old locations, and the team loved her, But for me, culture is a big part of my business, especially with the age group that I have. One bad apple can really turn the team against the leadership and what I'm trying to grow within the restaurant. And she just wasn't working out. Lots of coaching sessions with her and giving her homework tasks to try and complete to have her understand how we were trying to grow the team now that we were in the middle of COVID, and how we had to, unite together as a leadership team. And she just wasn't getting it. And the team loved her. She was great at her job, but the culture piece is something that I've told my leadership team from the beginning. If you don't make it and you start making waves with my culture, you'll see the door very quickly. And we tried for about 3 months with her, and then ultimately had to let her go and make the decision. That was, in my heart, I wanted to keep her because I knew she was going through a lot personally, but in my head as a leader, she was about to start ruining my culture. And sure enough, when we let her go, I had to do some damage control really quickly and pulled in some up-and-coming leaders who were close with her. So we went through like 10, 15 people in groups of like 3, and just didn't necessarily call her out, but just said, hey, this is the culture that we want. This is what we want y'all to do. This is why we do what we do. And this is why we coach people. This is why we have one-on-ones, and just really drive home. And right after that meeting, everything died down. All the grumbling stopped. But we had to pull the trigger. For me, that was pretty quick. When I worked with Rusty, I had to do things his way, and it tended to draw out very long with him, and I could see the impact on that with the leadership team if we didn't pull the plug quickly. So that's something I learned when I worked with Rusty, and definitely learned I needed to do it a lot quicker with my restaurant, because culture was number one for me. So.
Yeah, and the reason why that's so hard, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, but is that, you fall in love with these people, and you want to see them do well. But at the same time, you're also in love with the group, so I'll go a little bit of a sort of kind of a different direction when I'm talking about, instead of talking about, say, someone who is struggling, and that is tough when you're having to do with that. I would say when you're working with accomplished professionals and you have to make a decision that's going to change their work, and it's not popular. It's not a popular decision, but it's the right decision. That's some tough calls, and I've had to do that here just recently, working with a team, a very accomplished team, and we had to shift a couple things, and then they actually did some big work, and we had to go back and redo that, and so. And so obviously, I wasn't the popular guy, after that. But we've tried to develop a culture where they can come and talk to me, about they can push back. I value pushing. That's, And so they did. They did. And so really the stance I kind of took was I did not take, you will do this, like Gandalf, you shall not pass. No, I didn't do that. Although there are times you have to do that. I think in this case, what I did was I just got real vulnerable with them and just told them, you know what, there were some things we were going to do last semester that I've got some real good excuses why we didn't do them. COVID, everything, the world broke, right? But I didn't do them. I didn't follow through. And at the beginning of this year, all we were trying to do was just get things started twice on Monday, 3 times. And so really, when you did that long-range planning, we all did this work, I just didn't make the connection to get with you before that, and I'm sorry. I should have done that, and I didn't. But I'm going to support you. I'm going to try to make it right by giving you this time to kind of do that. We're going to come in. We're going to do these things so that you guys can do it. And I know that's tough, and I apologize, and I hope you can, at least understand that I didn't intend for you to do this work, and then now we have to redo it. But I thanked them profusely for what they're doing. They're working hard. I told them, you guys are the hardest workers I've ever seen. Your intent is gold, but we know a more proven way. And if we're going to come back to that vision again, we've got to work toward that. And that was, I think admitting to my mistakes, communicating the process, and then also just kind of, falling on those relationships, I think has helped in this process.
That's great. What we're going to do now, team, just for a moment, we're about 10:30, is we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, let you get more coffee, snacks. If you need to go to the restroom, go down this hall. Ladies' restrooms right in front of you. Men, if you make a right, you'll see it on the left-hand side. We'll give you about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, and what we're going to do for about the last 30, 45 minutes is we're going to talk communication, culture, and really the burden of leadership, because a lot of us have experienced some loss during this. And so we're going to talk through those three, and then finish up. So give you about a 5 to 7 minute break. So before we move on, a couple of, I know you're taking notes, a couple of, here's some highlights I got, for you to look back. And the last session is the 1 day a month Sabbath. I think that, Chris, I think you said that. Anybody here try to do something similar to that? How does that work for you, Jerry? Great. Works great? You're able to do it every month? Pretty much. Okay, what does that look like for you? Is it a certain day of the week? Do you go somewhere? How does that look? Yes.
Yeah, it's just part of Sabbath rhythms of trying to be still and listen to God. So my wife is a spiritual director, so she is. We have a lot of conversations about Sabbath and about spiritual rhythms and being still and listening to God, and so yeah, it's just a part of life, and I find in this season, especially I'd say even for me, I find that my Sabbath is a part of my lamenting. I've really been going through a season of lamenting and grieving. I took a break in the summer, and during that time, really asked the Holy Spirit permission just to grieve what's happened to our community. Grieve what's happened to in the lives of our people, in our nation. So there's been a lot of lamenting and grieving going on. And so as a leader, I have a bias toward action and a bias toward, okay, let's figure it out, let's get it done. And I didn't give myself a chance to grieve. And so a part of my rhythms now has been just lamenting and grieving in sabbatical.
Sabbatical. Awesome. That's good. I think, Doug, you said this, staying out of my people's way. How many leaders did that resonate with you, right? I wrote down, I'm looking at my people in my room. They're probably like looking at me, right? Staying out of my leader's way. That's good. That's good. One thing I think Ronnie said is fear, specifically how perfectionism keeps us from taking risk, right? I know we can all see that in our lines of work of here's what I want to do, but I'm scared if I'm not going to hit a home run, I'm not trying, right? That's not the case. Right? Sometimes we just need to get a B+ on something and then move on. And that was good. I love the other phrase of a fanatical focus. What Chris said about things that he's learned or could do well is listening well. How many of you could work on your ability to listen? I think he was reading sort of my diary of, hey, when people talk, I'm just thinking about what I'm going to say next. Right? That's dangerous. My wife tells me that all the time. She's like, don't think about what you're going to say next. Just listen, right? And then I learned that the drive-thru is really hard at Chick-fil-A, right? But you guys make it look so easy, right? Don't they? They look through. No one is allowed to ask Courtney, when are you opening back up your dining room? Okay? Nobody. Dennis, what were you going to say? That was your question. We need to know. Next year. There we go. She has her boss as well. So moving on is what I want to do for a moment is Pastor Ryan has got sort of a acrostic that he uses with our staff to talk about leadership, and it is SCORE, S-C-O-R-E, and it talks about servanthood, communication, ownership, replication, and encouragement. And so it just gives us a filter to not only think about our leadership, but to equip our leaders. So for a moment, I want to hit what for us has been really difficult, maybe for all of you, is the C. The communication, right? Because we have a tendency to over-communicate, under-communicate. How many of you have kids in KDSD? Anybody? I need to pay somebody just to check my email from KDSD, right? That's it. I need a full-time person. Let me know but I appreciate what they're trying to do, right? Yeah, I've got a couple people about to leave. But within that, here's what I'll ask you guys. is communication is difficult, right? And how for you as a leader, and Doug, we'll start with you, and I want to hear from each of you, what this is for you and for your organization. What has worked well, communication? Maybe what have you learned, and then what are some challenges that you still have, right? And so I'll start with you. Let's talk communication.
I think one thing, and I don't think COVID has done anything but accentuate it, but I think you have to understand the way in which each of your people communicate. There are folks you can send emails to all day long, and it's really not going to resonate. I mean, people that report to you, and they may respond, but it just, you've really got to get on the phone with them. And there's some people that you need a face-to-face with. And so I think, first of all, for me, one of the things I try to think of when it comes to communication is I have to communicate in the way that they hear me, not in the way that I want to communicate to them. It's kind of like the love languages. I always want to communicate in my love language, but you really have to communicate love in their love language. And so in their communication language, maybe I could say, knowing what that is and communicating with them that way. I think what's happening during this time is I have gone up a level, maybe is the way to say it, where somebody that I would email, I now phone. Somebody that I would have called, I now try to see in person. And so I do a lot more, and this is probably where I get in my folks' way, I do a lot more walking around and talking where I used to email more. You can email somebody who's in the office next to you. It's we could text them, we could do all that stuff. But I've gotten up and gotten face-to-face more because I feel like there's a higher standard for understanding right now because of all the things going on. And I want to make sure that we're on the same page. The other side of that, and somebody brought this up really while ago, and I'll speak really quickly to this, is I think there's a low-level anxiety that exists among everybody. And you're talking about grieving and lamenting, Jerry. I feel like everybody has a little bit of that. And I want my communication to also take into consideration what's the mental health of the people that are on my team. And if I get in person with them when I'm communicating, I can see what I will always miss through email.
Well, communication is a really great subject, and one that we all know always seems we need to do better, right? And you're right, I'm with you. I almost felt like I needed to, hire a part-timer just to read the emails from Katie. Yeah, it's a lot. A few years ago, my school, so just at my school, Wood Creek Elementary, we actually surveyed our folks because we were communicating every which way, every way we could. And for goodness sakes, I vlogged for 2 years. We were doing everything we could. What we heard from them was that the problem was that they were being bombarded by communication from every single direction, and it just gave them anxiety. And so we thought that was a good problem. We thought, okay, well, at least they're being communicated to, but at the same time, how do we become more strategic with this? And so we really kind of, after thinking about it, we came to 3 different ways that we communicate. And we communicated this to our community. And it's really helped even through this COVID thing that we're in when the world broke. And that is, we said that, okay, so parents, we're going to communicate the things that you need to know. In other words, you have a child here, and you must know these things. We're going to communicate that through Canvas. Now, Canvas is an online place. Actually, probably everybody's familiar with Canvas at this point. But before COVID, we probably started using Canvas about 5 years ago. Not like we're using it now. We're using it a lot more now. We didn't even know Canvas did some of the things it does now. But we started using it then. So we said those are the things. And what's great about that is that the parents were like, some I want text, some I want email, some I just want to check the website. They can set all that in Canvas. And we said we also have our website. Our website is for people outside of the district, or if you're within our campus, it's a reference tool. And then we said also social media. That was a third one. So Canvas, website, social media. Social media is where we will share the soul of Wood Creek. So if you want to know more of that, check out our social media. And some people are very interested in that, and some people are not interested in it at all. And so, and also we had moved our staff to where we're not trying to, like if I can do it in email, I will, we don't try to meet through meetings. We have some internal things that we do. One called Voxer that we use. I'm a very heavy user of Voxer. So when COVID hit, we found ourselves in this situation. We had some good processes in place. And what I found through this process is that we're not communicating finished, pretty ideas. We're communicating things as we go. So we're almost communicating the process through the process. Does that make sense? So they see that this is not developed and this could change. And so I've used that shrug emoji a lot. and so that's been helpful. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from my staff. And I've really focused in on my staff. I've kept my parents in the loop too, but really focused on my staff because I knew that as soon as the staff got activated again, they're the ones that deal with the community more directly than me. And so I was afraid if I dealt with the community, emphasized the community from my point of view and not the staff, that later on we'd have some problems. So I focused in on the staff, kept the community in bay. And I'd also say too that the emotions that I display also carry. So that was, the way I communicated mattered. And then I found that other people would emulate that with that. And so that would either help them or hurt them. And then kind of through this process, what we realized too is that a school is really ran by its calendar. We make the calendar last April for this school year. We made the calendar for this school year as if it was a normal school year. And so here we are going through the school year. It's like we set everything up on the shelf. We're walking down the aisle now. Everything's set on the shelf, and we're finding ourselves walking down the aisle, pulling things frantically off the shelf and trying to rearrange them as we go. And so it's made us go from offense to defense. And so, by the way, the idea of changing a calendar mid-year, that's like nobody. No, I mean, Miss Schaefer here, she was a principal. You don't change the calendar midway. Right? So one of the things that we started talking about was, what if we just change our calendar? Let's just change it. And let's say all those events that we have, what if they could all work in phase 1 protocols? And so we're in the process of doing that. And then what if we come out of phase 1 protocols? Of course, my response to that was, do you really think February 2021 is going to be like February 2020? I mean, do you really think that? And they're like, well, no, I don't think so. And I said, and even if it is, we'll just pause the things we paused. We'll reframe the things that we're reframing. And I encourage them and challenge them, don't just cancel. Rethink. How do we do this in phase 1 protocols? And so we're in the process of that right now. So like I said, communication I think is important, and I think those structures you have behind them are important. And for us, we're hoping that the calendar helps us to move back to offense, back to where we can get back to our vision, so we're not constantly thinking about what do we need to change, or this is coming up next week and we haven't thought about it. Those kinds of things.
For me, Chick-fil-A Inc. has done a really good job. I think right in the beginning of March, they were trying to figure out how to communicate the best way to us operators. And so they agreed to do a 90-day plan. And so they figured that out pretty quickly, that we're only going to plan out the next 90 days. And then we'll give you 30-day notice or 60-day notice on different initiatives or phase 1 or phase 2. And so that even goes with opening the dining room. They've given us a 90-day heads up. Hey, in 90 days, all restaurants are going to have to open their dining room. Right now, it's optional. We're choosing not to, specifically here in Katy, just to make sure that the team stays safe. And entering into the holidays, it can be really, really a lot of pressure. But so then we've committed to the team, and I've communicated that, hey, up until the end of the year, we'll stay drive-through only, and then we'll have discussions with the leadership team and with the other operators here in Katy, what we feel like is the best move for our community. But I think Chick-fil-A Inc. did a great job with that, where they decided to do just 90 days. And then we also knew within the 90 days, there were some things that wiggled, but there were certain things that they were like, we won't touch until 90 days. How that played out with my team is I told them, like I said, dining room, I commit to this. Certain initiatives within the restaurant, like we can have certain types of breaks or contests and all that stuff. But I would say, like, for communication within my team and how I feel like Chick-fil-A did it to us is just keep it simple. So Chick-fil-A recreated our website and was like, these are COVID related. And so they kept it simple. Like, these are the 3 things for COVID. Click on these articles. Here's this video. And so they made it really simple for us to go online and find the communication on what was going on within the world and within our organization. So I did the same thing with my team. I kept it simple. We had one weekly newsletter that got emailed out, and then that was printed and posted where the break area was. And so we just kept it real simple. So that's just what helped us the most.
We actually had different types of communication for different needs. When COVID hit, we established a COVID-19 response team. Fortunately, I have a couple of members on my board who worked for BP, and so they had expertise in developing a response team because of the oil spill many, many years ago. And so we communicated with our families about what we were going to be doing. We communicated with our families about the health and safety precautions we were going to put in place. And we kept them abreast of what we were doing, when we might open. We finally stopped doing that because every time we thought we might open, then it would rise, and so we'd say, we're not going to open. So, but we did, in our last communication to our families, we did say, hey, our target date for opening was yesterday, and fortunately, we were able to meet that because our communication to our families was that we were going to follow Harris County because our building is in Harris County. And that once Harris County went orange or yellow, yellow, then we would open up with a limited number. Well, Harris County, they're kind of hard to follow. So we made the decision that we were going to open up because we were going to, when we got a 5% positivity rate. Harris County said they would move to orange, and then things would start opening up. Well, now they've moved it to 2.5. And so we made the decision, they're going to wait till it gets to 0 before they open up. So we made the decision, we're going to open up because we're at 5%. Fort Bend, when we have participants from Fort Bend, so we communicated Fort Bend, is at 5%. They begin to open up things. And so they're starting to open up bars. If they can open up bars, then we can open up our day program. So we did that with limited numbers. So that's one form of communication that we had. The other, as a leader, as I said, our board, we have different committees within our board. And so I've made it a point that when committees, I've asked them to send me an email when the committees are going to meet, because I may not be able to make all the committee meetings, but I'd like to sit in a lot of those, because sometimes committees make decisions that are going to impact other committees and don't realize that. So it's important for me to know what committees are, what they're discussing, what their plans are, and to provide some guidance and saying, hey, that's going to impact marketing and communication. So we need to pull in marketing and communication on this as well. So it eliminates a lot of confusion because we at one time were doing a lot of the committee work during the board meetings. And I said, that's not what a board meeting's about. We need to work and then just bring reports and communicate to the board as a whole what each committee's doing. So
I think of the power of 2 things, the power of good questions and short answers. So on the power of good questions, on a regular basis, friends will ask me, so tell me how I can do a PhD in the UK or in Europe. And so I will ask them, what's your question? And they say, what do you mean, what's your question? What question are you trying to answer? What is your question? And they're like, well, I don't have a question. And I'll tell them, then you're not ready to pursue a PhD, because PhDs are driven by good questions. I mean, Brian Haynes in the milestones here at Kingsland, it was driven by a good question Brian Haynes was asking. So I think as leaders, we need to ask good questions and encourage those we lead to ask good questions. And the second, on short answers, y'all have heard Mark Twain's comment, sorry I wrote such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. I tell my teams that they need to create reports and documents that are 1 page long. Sometimes we can push it and do 1 page front and back. So they'll work on a project for months and come to me with a 5-page report. And I say, get it down to 1 page. And they say, I can't, that's impossible. I say, okay, we're not going to release it until it's down to 1 page. Now, personally, this means I tweak with font and margins a lot. There might be no margins, and we might be like at a 6-point font by the end. No, just kidding. 10-point font is my limit. But I think when you force your teams to have solutions, answers, reports on one page, that does something to brevity. I mean, Winston Churchill, he was a fanatic about this. He hated long letters that his staff made him read through. He made his staff write short letters and did, exercises and lessons and how to be more concise. And I think we need that as leaders in this season.
I think that's great because you all highlighted a few things. I love all of those, taking some notes of good questions, short answers. Right? All of us have seen those long emails, and you open them and you're tired. You're like, I'm not reading this. What does this look like? I spoke to a sort of a different leadership roundtables. Actually, it was a Zoom a few months ago, and this one church said, quote, well, what we lack in accuracy, we're going to make up for in volume. And I'm like, that only works in artillery, right? Anywhere else. Like, no, don't do that. But Doug brought up a good point. Let's talk internal communication. Is as you lead your staff, is there something about leadership by walking around? Right? Abraham Lincoln, he would write on his calendar, LBWA. Leadership by walking around, because my staff has heard me say a lot is what's more contagious than COVID is your attitude about what you're communicating, right? And one of you said it is the way you communicate matter. It is for us as a team is one of the things that we did is I remember it was the second or third week in March when we realized, okay, the rodeo got canceled. This is a little different. Right, and we actually, a handful of us gathered at my kitchen table, and we said, here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to tell our people everything we're not doing. They're getting that from everywhere else. We're going to tell them everything we're doing, right? We're just going to tell them that. We did a division, I think some of you mentioned, of who communicates what. Our senior pastor is communicating vision. Our administrative pastor, Todd and JP, they're going to communicate, building restrictions, and then our ministry team, is we're going to communicate what we're doing. Now, was there exceptions to that? Yes, but the exception is the exception. If it's all the time, it's no longer the exception, right? And so that's how we tried to move throughout, and a lot of that was those principles that you all shared, is that sort of principle based. And with that is we tried to adopt certain themes, right? With that is being short. I'm very be brief, be bright, be gone, right? Like, Give me those, as Chris mentioned. And so we said, hey, for a lot of our stuff is we're going to have common sense and common courtesy. That's going to dictate our decision making, right? How do we view this through this lens? And so my challenge to you all is to go back, look at your teams, your organizations, and say, hey, how do we communicate? What are the means? What does this look like? Because ask your people. Who said we did a survey? Ronnie, you said you did a survey. That's huge. Right? Is as a parent at Kingsland is my kids are in ministries, and I remember pre-COVID is I'd get emails from children's ministry, I'd get emails from high school ministries, I get email from the adult stuff, and I'm like, man, I've got 6 emails this week, right? I'm not reading those. How can we condense those down? And so we've tried to do better at it, but we still struggle. Because communication not only affects your organization, it impacts your staff culture. So Bobby, I know we got a few more questions about culture.
Yeah, you've already mentioned a ton of staff culture of Courtney just making hard decisions because you care deeply about staff culture. It's a big thing, and as we're talking, I have a big question as leaders because most of you are at the top, if not close to the top of your organization, and having a boss, I know my leader, Brad's my boss, by the way. I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but I know that things that he needs from me, he needs me to be brief. One of the things that I know from Brad is if I have a problem or if I have something that I want to complain about, I can't just complain about it. I have to have solutions to back it up. That's something I know he's not going to listen to me because there's not a problem if I don't have a solution. So for you guys, and we'll have everybody go, we'll start with Chris. The question is, as leaders, as people who work under you, and many of us in here, we all have bosses. What do you need as leaders? What is like 1 or 2 things, man, this is what I need from those who work for me. How can we help from the second seat, if you will? How can we help our bosses be successful? What are some stuff that you wish, man, if I could get in front of my staff, I wish they would know this. so that I can lead better. So, Chris.
I had an older friend in the UK when we lived in London who said that the two loneliest groups of people that he spent time with were vicars, which are senior pastors, and school principals. And so he tried to make it a point to go golfing with both pastor friends and school principals. So I think your pastors and your leaders need friends. So be a friend, hang out, don't talk business, talk life, have fun. I think the other thing is I am committed to make my boss look good. Like, I want to work really hard, and I want to make my boss look good to his bosses. And so I think to be a good leader, I need to be a good follower and vice versa. So I'm really looking to celebrate and make my boss look good, and I think that's something that good leaders and followers ought to be doing.
I've always told my staff, more so probably when I was working in the school district as the executive director for special education, is that I would remind my staff, I'm the executive director, but I don't know everything. And so I hire people who know how to do the job and then get out of the way and let them do their job. But what can make me be a better leader is for you to come and question some of my decisions. You're out there in the field. You're out there on the campus. You know what the needs are probably far better than I do in terms of assistive technology or evaluations and different types of things like that. So if I make a decision that you feel like it's not a good decision and it's not going to be helpful to the program, then I want you to question me about it, okay? But I want you to be able to give me some answers too, and how we can make it better. And I always wanted my staff to know that I'm a better leader when them coming into the door, and I always had an open door policy. Now, sometimes that can take up a lot of your time, but it's critical, I think, in helping you to become a better leader, because folks can come in and share information with you and share their ideas and their thoughts. And the other thing I always remember, that it's not about me, okay? And it's about us as a team and what we can do. Because if we work better as a team, then I work better as a leader.
I agree with what everyone has said so far. I tell my team, always ask why, always ask a question. If you don't agree with the decision or you wonder why something happened within the restaurant or we made a change to a policy or a system, just ask a question. We've had several people who have left, and we kind of have like a closeout interview, and they tell us all this stuff, and I'm like, well, you never said anything. I said, I can't fix it if you don't communicate about it. And that's what is the hardest part about, I guess, my job is I'm teaching 16, 17, 18-year-olds how to have a job, and if there's a conflict, to like bring it up to us, or even be able just to communicate a question and let them know that it's okay. Like, we're not gonna fire you for having a question. So I just tell the team, always ask why, always ask a question. If you don't understand or need more information, just ask why. And then I think someone else was saying, come with the solution. So Chick-fil-A's taught us, you walk in, don't put everyone's monkey on your back. Like, you have what you're supposed to be doing. If someone comes up to you and says the ice machine's not working and the Henny Penny is exploding and the drive-through monitor isn't working, it's asking them, well, do you know how to fix it? Can you call somebody? Can you do this? Shut the lid and it won't explode anymore. And, where's the fire extinguisher? Like, stuff like that, versus like walking through and saying, I'll call for the ice machine, or I'll go get the fire extinguisher, whatever it is. You have specific roles within the restaurant. Make sure that the team is helping you with that. So I always encourage them to do that. And when I worked with my old boss, I read the book, Creative Followership by Jimmy Collins. And what really stuck out with me is that Jimmy was the CEO of Chick-fil-A, so he worked with Truett Cathy, our founder, very closely, and his role was he wanted to make sure that Truett looked the best that he could. And so after reading that, I was like, okay, my job is to make my boss look the best that he can be and be number one in whatever areas that we could be in, and how can I do that? And so I would assess and look at his business and see, well, how can I grow it and what can I do to make Rusty look the best? And so I encourage my leaders, to have that same thing, encourage them to read that book, because it just helps show Chick-fil-A didn't become what they did just because of Truett, but because of Jimmy and other people around Truett, that Truett and the Cathy family let them be better at them than something else, than what they were.
So one of the most important things I do in my role is hiring. Hiring is the most important thing I do. The next probably most important thing I do is developing those that I hire. Hiring is, I take that so serious. And so when it comes to hiring, I hire the person, not the skill. I used to hire the skill, not the person. Big mistake. Big mistake. Because you can't change the person, but if they're the right kind of person, you can help develop the skill. You really can. One of the things I tell people, especially the ones that are really close to me, is I tell them, I need your pushback. You are very different from me, and that's why I'm interested in you. I haven't hired you yet. You're in like a second, third interview phase. Are you willing to, question me, push me back? Don't do it in front of a crowd and make me cry and go in the fetal position. But but I need you to push me back. I'm hiring you because you're different than I am, and I need your angle. And so they'll do it a first time, but depending upon how I react is whether or not they'll do it the next time. Brad and them, they talk about that 10-second rule, which I'm better at with my staff than I am with my kids, by the way. But my wife's there to kind of help me out sometimes. But I think they start to value, when I'm hiring folks, we're valuing obviously the same kinds of things, but then they'll start to value the things that I value. That's what they'll do. So I think what I need from them is diversity of thought. Once it's decided, so since we are so diverse, by the way, and I'm not just talking about race, although that is there. I'm talking about the way they think, their angle. That is very diverse. We want that. And so I'll call them out. What do you think? What do you think? I need to know. But because we all think so differently, that means that there is no one decision that hits everybody. And so once we do decide, we need unity. We need to carry it out with unity. And then, like Fred, I need them to remind me it's not about me. We need to remind each other about that. And sometimes, I'm the one encouraging them, but sometimes they're the ones encouraging me because we all get tired, right? So what's valued? What's valued is the work. It's not about me, right? So don't make your focus me. Make your focus all students will grow one school year in a school year. That's what I want. That's what I'm fanatic about. And so diversity, unity, and reminding me, keeping me on the straight and narrow.
I think there's two things I would want my staff to know, but I think they hear this from me a lot. One is, I'll say the phrase, even though I have your back, doesn't mean you always get what you want. Sometimes it's hard. I want my staff to know that I'm fighting for them, whether that's resources or place on the calendar or promotional time or something like that I want them to know that I don't always get what I want. There's always the perception that whoever's above me probably gets whatever they want. And that's just never the case. And so I try to remember that myself. I want them to remember that. The second thing is this. I want them to be a team player. One of the most impacting books I've read in the last few years is Patrick Lencioni's Ideal Team Player. It's a fantastic book because it talks about there's three things that are really needed for a good, strong team player. A good, strong team player, and to Ronnie's point, if you hire a team player, you can develop them into the skill that you want them to, and they'll be a benefit. But if you get a very talented person who's a jerk, you're not gonna have much success. And so in that book, he talks about people being hungry, humble, and smart. And so that's what I look at. First of all, when I hire, that's the rating system. That's the rubric I use for hiring is, are they hungry, are they humble, are they smart? Hungry is just that I'm passionate about this. This is something I think about on my drive home and I think about on my drive in because it's important to me. I don't want our staff to think about things all the time, but I don't want it to be really easy that by the time they've gotten out of the parking lot, they don't even remember what they do for a living. And so I want them to be hungry. I want them to be humble. I think humility is one of the greatest aspects in leadership today, is that humility is what drives the best leaders. And that's that. It's not about me. You know, you've heard Fred say it, you've heard Ronnie say it. It's this idea that we are in this together. I'm replaceable. Somebody else could come in and do what I do. I've got to understand that. So there's humility. And then there's smart. Now, I don't really like that word. That's Lencioni's word. That's more emotional intelligence. It's being able to know that what you're saying and what you're doing, how that's impacting people. It's being able to read. If you're in a meeting and you say something and you're able to read the people around you and understand how your actions and your words impact them. And so I think if you have hungry, humble, and smart, you really have a great team player. And that's what I want my team to hear, is that I need more than anything is I need them to be team players.
That's good. I think all of us, we want to know what our boss wants from us, and then likewise what we can do for our people. Before I transition, I'm going to throw Dennis on the carpet. I handing the microphone. So I'm about to ask you a question. Dennis Terpsey leads a large nonprofit, very diverse ministry that spans a lot of geographical miles. What do you need from your people? How does that look like for you?
Well, definitely the first two, that I need them to be hungry, and I'll translate hungry into the ministry world as passionate. I need them to be humble. That goes across the board, humble, and emotional intelligence certainly is an aspect of it, but I would translate that into more of compassion. I need people who are compassionate and can empathize. We meet a lot of people where they are in underdeveloped, poverty-stricken communities that have a lot of issues going on in their life, right? And so they need to be good listeners. And if we're not careful, and I know this in business too, I have a business background, if we're not careful, we tend to be a mile wide and an inch deep. Mm-hmm. This goes back to what Ronnie was saying earlier. We need to be able to say no to a lot of things, but say yes to a few things and do those very well, because we're really in the business of holistic restoration with somebody in their life. And if I try to develop a ministry, or if I try to develop a service line or whatever to satisfy everybody's needs, I'm not going to be good at anything, right? But I also have to know my strengths and equally important to know my weaknesses, and find other organizations out there, find other people out there that can help offset those weaknesses, right? So I can't take care of every person's need that I meet, but I'm going to know somebody that can.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Dennis. Absolutely.
I think also that as a leader, your folks need to know what your expectations are. I've worked with people who have kept those to themselves, so you don't know what to expect from the leader and what they expect from you. And so sharing those expectations with the folks that you work with helps you become a better leader.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I would add to that, and this is just my long-term philosophy on leadership, and I heard a lot of that today, is as a leader, I'm not as concerned about how many followers I have. I'm more concerned with how many leaders am I creating.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, right? It's the mark of a leader. You make other leaders. That's good. You mentioned expectations. We talked earlier about dreaming. What I've learned is, for all of us, sometimes depending on your job, is you need to give your boss the ability to dream. right? You need to, I'll use a very simplistic example at Kingsland. As Pastor Ryan is a dreamer, and he likes to throw ideas out. When he first got here, he got here in June or July, and we're starting to talk about the fall calendar, and he saw on there was a fall festival at the church. And he said, okay, so tell me about that. And well, it's at the church, and people come and do this. And he said, oh man, that's great, And he said, maybe one of these days we consider and think about if we move that to neighborhoods, right? We meet people in their homes. This is the one time of the year on Halloween where everybody knocks on your door. And he just tossed it out there, right? And a month later at a staff meeting, and our preschool and children department was like, we've canceled Fall Festival. And here he's like, guys, I was dreaming, like just for like a moment. And so we had to come up with, okay, what's a tool, right, that we can let our boss dream? And so we actually have a thing where it's an idea, suggestive, or directive. Right? And so where Ryan can say, or if I'm leading our team, I can say, this is an idea. An idea means nobody has to move on this. We're just going to throw it out there and see if it sticks. A suggestion is, hey, I really like this idea a little bit, right? And if we're not going to do it, just let me know, right? I depend on you and your areas to let me know that. A directive is we're doing it. Right? So that gives our staff clarity. It doesn't waste time and effort. But for me, as I know my boss, he needs the ability to dream. Right? He needs the ability to think things through. Secondly, is for me, for my team, is one of the things I tell them often is, I need to know, how can I help you? I can't read your mind. Right? I can't read your mind. Like, don't come to me when the water is boiling. I need to know when it's heating up. Right? If it's already boiling and everything's flowing over, now we're just reactive. Okay, tell me when it's warming up. So let me know how I can help you. And then from a philosophy standpoint, is what I need constantly from our team is pass negative ups and positive down. Right? That's their job. That's their job as leaders. Regardless of the situation, they're passing positives down. Somebody comes to them with a problem. Man, can you believe that student ministry, they did this? Man, you know what? I know our student staff, they do amazing things for kids. They're at every ball game and this every night, and you're passing positives down. Then later they pass negatives up. But for all of us, I think it's important to know, what does our boss need? And then how do we facilitate that? What questions do you guys have? We're about to close, but from the group, a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, culture, communication, lessons learned, hardship, from the group, you've got these guys here for a few more moments. Anything that you have for them?
I got a question. So, not that anybody on our team ever disagrees about the vision, direction that we're supposed to go, but if that were to happen, how do you help encourage your teams, even if they're maybe on the opposite side of the aisle from you on a decision, to work into that vision and carry out what they need to be doing to reinforce it, even if they don't agree?
I can talk a little bit about this, or at least get it started. What I try to do is I try to go back to beliefs. So I'll ask them, sometimes if they're asking me questions, sometimes I'll ask them questions back, or I may already know some things about them in their own beliefs. And then some of these things I try to tie back to their beliefs. Now, with that said, let me first say, this answer I'm giving you assumes that like my way is the best way, right? And it isn't always, because sometimes when they push back, sometimes they're right. And I think in that moment, it's vulnerability, and it's the ability to be able to admit that, okay, hey, you know what, that might be way better. But I think why I'm able to do that is because I'm constantly thinking about the work itself. And so if your suggestion is better for the work, like we all kind of rally around that. And sometimes it's this, most of the time it's this. It's a bad suggestion that then gets battered around collaboratively with the group that turns into something really great for the work. But I understood your question to be like, how do you kind of win them over? And I think if I still believe it's the right way, I go back to beliefs. And if that doesn't work, here's the other thing I say. It's okay to disagree, right? Mm-hmm. For some reason in our culture, we think if we disagree, all of a sudden we can't be friends, right? And I don't know why that is. Like, we can both be friends we can both work together and respect each other and completely disagree with each other, right? And so I have to remind people sometimes that, you know what, we'll just agree to disagree, and that's okay. That's totally cool.
That's awesome. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So, what are some creative ways that you found to cast a vision, especially when you're recruiting volunteers versus paid workers?
When I came on as the president of the board for the Ark of Katy, we didn't have a mission statement, we didn't have a vision statement. And so and because there wasn't a mission or a vision statement, there was really kind of a lack of direction. I mean, we were doing things here and doing things there and there. Because my belief is the mission gives the organization the direction they need to go. And so we spent about 3, 4, 5 board meetings, not the whole board meeting, but each board meeting was dedicated to developing a mission and vision statement. Unfortunately, I had some training in developing mission and vision statements. And so it was everybody coming together and developing that mission statement that everyone could buy into. And we would go around and ask, I mean, can you fall on the sword for this? I mean, do you believe in this? And if there was disagreement, then we would work it out until finally we came to a point where everyone agreed to this particular mission statement. Because we said, if this is our mission, then this is what we're going to use to base all of our decisions on in terms of programming, direction that we're going to go. Because if we don't, then it's just words on a wall, and it really doesn't carry any action. So it's actually buy-in to the development of that mission statement.
I have 2 quick thoughts. I think, I don't do this well, but my boss is a master at this, telling good stories.
Yep.
Like capturing people's imagination and vision with great stories of changed lives. And the second thing is, Bill Hybels talks about this in his book, Volunteerism. The first experience that person has with volunteering, make sure it's an amazing experience.
Yep.
Like if it's a restaurant, make sure that first bite is an amazing bite so they want to eat more. And so I think giving them that great first experience, and then also before that experience, telling stories that gets them excited.
If I can follow up, the board developed the mission statement, but we just didn't keep it at the board level. We made sure that our instructors and our day program coordinator, we ran that vision and mission statement by them too, because this is how we're going to operate under this mission statement.
I mean, for us, they're paid, but it's hard to get people to want to work in the restaurant, especially the age group and the hours that we have and stuff. But we try and talk through like the perks on why it's great to work at Chick-fil-A. So kind of same thing, why it's great to be a volunteer. So for us, it's great to work at Chick-fil-A because flexible schedule, you have scholarship that you can do. It looks great on a resume. Chick-fil-A Inc. has internships that you could do in your career if you want it. Some restaurants, offer insurance, 401ks and all that stuff. So we try and throw out like the perks on why it's great to work at Chick-fil-A and why it's great to work with a company like ours. So kind of the same thing with volunteers. What looks, for high school kids, it looks great to volunteer because it's great for scholarship stuff. So that's how we portray it for Chick-fil-A.
I would throw in something else too with volunteers, because in a church setting, we live and die by volunteers. I mean, our staff could never pull off the hundreds of people that we need to do all this. One of the things that we try to remember and we try to talk about a lot with volunteers is every time a volunteer comes in, they're asking you the question, what's the culture here? What's the expectation? What do you think I'm gonna do? Because they don't know, they're coming in new. If you will teach all the new people the culture that you want to have, and then protect that as much as you can, there's gonna come a tipping point where you're going to see, now it's a long run, but you can find that spot where you can really change the culture. And we can't pay our volunteers. I jokingly say, your swim pool is going to have a diving board in heaven with all the things that you've done in volunteering for our church. But one of the ways that we try to motivate them is by being part of a culture they believe in. And so culture with volunteers is so important, but I think you have to build it. And if it doesn't exist, you have to build it with the new people that are coming in, set the standard for them, and then carry that through.
I love that you were talking about culture. I mean, at a school, volunteers are a big part of what we do. My school in particular, we have a lot of volunteers. Usually, I mean, before the world broke, we had about 40,000 hours in volunteer hours each year. They run a budget a little north of $300,000, and they do a lot for us. Now, of course, I'm talking about after 13 years of development, right? So kind of we go back, one of the things that they asked me back in '07 when we were starting is, like, are we going to be able to like volunteer and do some things? And I said yes and no. Yes in purposeful ways, no in unplanned ways. And one of the things I pointed out to them then was, and still now, and even to new teachers as they come in, is that, we thought around, we said, you know what, we know Wood Creek's going to be a great school. This is back in '07 when we first opened. It's going to be a great school. It's going to have, kids are going to do well. But what is it that we want to be known for? And what we said is, we want to be known for how we love people. That's what we want to be known for. So in our language, we use love for lots of things. Like I love my wife. I also love shrimp tacos over at Papacitos. Oh yeah, those are good. And so we define that. And I define that. I just tell them, I'm just going to read this excerpt. And so I title it Love Is. And I don't have to tell them where it is. It speaks for itself. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. I'll read the whole thing, all the way down to love never fails. It's on the letterhead. Love never fails. And so we talk about to the staff. This starts with us. We talk about to the parents. This is what we mean when we say we love your kids. When we say we love you. This is what we mean. And then it carries over through the kids to the parents. And so with them, I think casting a vision is very, very important. But I think for the parents too, they want to know, at least in my industry, that you love their kids, right? And that's not a feeling, that's an action. And so I think having them set a vision, having them set norms, and all those kinds of things are important. But that culture comes back to what are they focused on? And they come in and we talk about, like I praise them. You've never lost focus on your purpose is to help with these kids, to love these kids, to help us to do that. So that's the way we've kind of approached it, and so far it's been working with that.
Just look at the training for your volunteers. So for our training for new hires, we realized if we rush their training in any way, they're probably one of the first ones to leave because they don't feel equipped, or they feel like no one's listening to them, or they were thrown in or whatever. But we realized if we followed our system on training them, that they're the ones that stayed the longest and were the most consistent. So when we changed our training, or as long as we're consistent with the training and make a big deal and introduce them to the team and really tell them the why behind our company, that they stay. And so just really think about the training piece. Don't throw someone in and assume they know how to volunteer or how to work the iPad on the drive-thru or whatever, teach a class, but really look at the training and make sure that they know what they're supposed to be doing and why.
Well, guys, we told you on the email we'd get you out of here by 11:30. So as we close, I just want to thank this panel again. I mean, I know these men and women personally. I know you're away from your office, from your job today, so it's not taken lightly on us that you spent some time here this morning. And if you were here, if you registered, I'll make sure, I think they're going to be okay with it, that I'll provide their contact info, because you may have follow-up questions. You may want to know something they said that tug at your heart a little bit. Maybe you've got a nonprofit question. Maybe you've got something about leadership and school and recruiting. Maybe it's church. Don't ask Courtney when Chick-fil-A is going to open, but if you want to talk about teams, right, she can do that. But thank you guys so much. Thank you all for being here and for your churches. Go back and tell your boss we said thank you. Hopefully this was beneficial to you. Bobby, a couple announcements and close us out, man.
Yes, sir. Everybody pull out your phone real quick. I just want you to pull out your calendar app and mark your calendars. We like to do these roundtables, but we're going to go even next level on February 25th and 26th. We're going to have our Empowered Homes Conference. We have ministry leaders from all over the country planning to come and join us, as well as some really big heavy hitter speakers that we have, some breakouts, some conversations, all focused on growing strong leaders so we can have strong churches and strong families. And I'm super excited about that. So that our next time that you'll get emails. How many of y'all get emails from me? All the emails from the next few months are going to be about the conference because we want you to be there. We want you to bring your whole team. We want you to bring anybody and everybody that you can come be a part of. It's all about leadership and being the best leader you can possibly be. The second thing, because Empowered Homes, we want to resource you. We have a brand new resource. You see it on your table, a conversation kit. We asked all of our parents at Kingsland, what do you need from us as we partner with you? And the question kept coming, how do I disciple my kids? How do I talk to my kids? And so we developed a conversation kit because we believe the key to discipleship is good conversation. So this is a great resource for you. You could take it. It's also on empoweredhomes.org. You can share it with any families in your congregations or context, and we'd love for you to do that. So with that, let me pray for us. Thank you guys for being here. So appreciate y'all. Let's pray. Father, we love you. God, just thank you so much for the leaders in this room. It's no accident that we're here today. It's no accident that you've put us in our context to lead the people that we lead and the homes that are representative in all of those people that we lead. God, would you do something amazing that 10 years from now, when we look back, we can say, God, you were up to some awesome things through this crisis, through COVID, through all of this, God. Thank you for leaders who are honest and sharing their hearts about the last 6 months. But God, we are hopeful, not only because of the gospel, but because you've equipped us to lead in such a time as this, Father. So as we leave this place, may we be refreshed and encouraged and to go out and to proclaim who you are for your kingdom and your glory. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.